You've just stepped into the Motivation Library, a place where struggles turn into stories of strength and dreams transform into destinies. Every book is a path, every chapter a step forward. Today, we walk a new path. Let's begin. Preface. Every great story begins in the dark. Not under the spotlight, not on the victory stand, but in the silence after the fall. We all have that moment. The one where everything we built, every dream, every plan, every ounce of confidence, collapses in front of us. Maybe it was a rejection that cut too deep. Maybe it was a dream that slipped through your fingers when you were this close. Or maybe it was just life whispering, "Not yet." That's where this book begins. In the wreckage. In the moments we don't post, the nights we don't talk about, the questions we whisper to the ceiling when no one's listening. Because failure, the word we're all terrified of, isn't the villain we were taught to run from. It's the teacher we've been avoiding. The fire that forges character, burns away ego, and leaves behind something unshakable: resilience. You see, every person you admire has fallen, harder, deeper, and longer than you think. But what separates them from the rest isn't luck or talent. It's what they did with the fall. When Thomas Edison's lab burned to the ground, he didn't mourn the ashes, he said. Now we can start fresh. When Oprah was told she'd never make it in television, she didn't listen. She became the voice of millions. When J.K. Rowling faced rejection after rejection, she didn't quit. She kept writing in cafes she could barely afford to sit in. They didn't escape failure. They used it. And that's what this book is about. Fail Forward, Rise Higher isn't another book about how to never fail. It's a guide to what to do after you fall, when you're face down in the dust, heartbeat heavy, and every part of you wants to quit. It's about rebuilding your confidence brick by brick when everything collapses. It's about learning how to dance with rejection instead of running from it. It's about turning the pain of your fall into the fuel for your rise. Because failure isn't a dead end, it's a detour. And sometimes, that detour leads you exactly where you were meant to go. In these pages, you'll walk with those who've failed and risen higher, from inventors and artists to everyday warriors who refuse to give up. You'll see the cracks where the light got in. You'll learn how to redefine what it means to lose, and how to rise with a power you didn't know lived inside you. This isn't a self-help manual. It's a battle cry for the broken. It's a letter to the dreamers who've tasted defeat and still want more. It's proof that falling doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. Because no one remembers the person who never fell. They remember the one who did, and got back up anyway. So if you're holding this book in your hands right now, maybe you've fallen. Maybe you're standing at rock bottom, wondering how much more you can take. Here's the truth. You're exactly where your comeback begins. This is where the old you burns away and the unbreakable you is born. This is where failure becomes your fuel, where pain becomes your teacher, and where the voice inside you says, "I'm not done yet." This book isn't here to promise you an easy climb. It's here to remind you that you're still capable of climbing. No matter how many times you've fallen, no matter who's walked away, no matter how long it's been dark, there's still light inside you. You don't have to start from where you were. You just have to start from where you are. So take a deep breath, turn the page, and remember, you don't fall back. You fail forward. And then, you rise higher. Chapter 1. The Gift of Falling. There is a silence that follows failure, a silence that feels louder than any applause you've ever received. It echoes in your head when the world moves on, when dreams turn into dust, when everything you thought you were building suddenly collapses under its own weight. Every dreamer, every fighter, every soul who ever dared to reach for something bigger has met that silence. Some were crushed by it. Others, they listened. They realized that inside that silence is the most powerful teacher life could ever give: failure itself. Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Failure isn't a punishment. It's a process. It's the refining fire that burns away what's weak, what's untrue, what's not ready, and leaves only what's real. The fall of a dream. Imagine a young man named David, standing under the bright lights of a stage that once felt like destiny. He's worked for years, endless rehearsals, auditions, nights without sleep, to land this one shot at becoming a professional musician. But halfway through his performance, something goes wrong. His guitar string snaps. The rhythm falters. His voice cracks. The crowd shifts, whispers. A wave of panic rises in his chest, and suddenly he's not singing. he's sinking. When it's over, the applause never comes. He walks off the stage, his body trembling, his dream bleeding out quietly beneath the weight of humiliation. That night, David sits on the edge of his bed, staring at his reflection, and for the first time in his life, he feels small, invisible, defeated. But days later, when the noise in his mind begins to fade, something strange happens. He starts writing again, not for fame, not for applause, but for himself. And the songs that come out this time are different, raw, honest, stripped of ego. A year later, those same songs would become the core of his first successful album, one that touched millions. David learned what most people spend their lives avoiding. You don't rise because you never fall. You rise because you learn how to get back up differently. The hidden curriculum of failure. There's a curriculum only life can teach. No classroom, no TED Talk, no self-help quote can replace the education you get from losing something that mattered to you. You learn humility, not the kind that bows its head, but the kind that opens its heart. You learn clarity, what you really want, what's worth fighting for, what isn't. And above all, you learn resilience, that invisible muscle that grows stronger every time you survive something that once felt unbearable. Think of Thomas Edison, who failed over 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. When asked how it felt to fail so often, he said, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." Or J.K. Rowling, who was living in poverty, rejected by 12 publishers, told her story was too long and too dark until she created Harry Potter and built a legacy that changed generations. They didn't rise in spite of failure. They rose because of it. The world loves to celebrate success stories. But what it hides is the mess before the miracle, the sleepless nights, the letters that never got replies, the endless self-doubt, the what's the point anymore moments. Those are the gifts of falling, invisible, unglamorous, but essential. Because failure doesn't take from you, it reveals you. The weight of falling apart. Every fall comes with a weight, a kind of emotional gravity that can crush your confidence if you don't understand it. You start hearing voices. You're not enough. You should have known better. You'll never make it. And yet, in the ashes of those thoughts, there's a whisper, a quieter, truer voice that says, "You're still here." That's where growth begins. Not when you feel strong, but when you realize you survived your own breaking. There's a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The cracks aren't hidden. They're highlighted, celebrated, transformed into art. That's what failure does to us. It breaks us open so we can rebuild with gold in our cracks, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more beautiful than before. The fall that saved me. Let's step away from legends for a second and talk about someone ordinary, someone like Sarah, a young entrepreneur who lost everything after her first business collapsed. Investors pulled out. Her team quit. She had to move back into her parents' house at 30, drowning in debt and shame. For months, she avoided people. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. She'd built her entire identity around success, and when it crumbled, so did she. But then one evening, she read something that changed her life. It said, "Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it." That night, she sat down with a notebook and wrote every mistake she'd made, not to torture herself, but to understand. She noticed patterns, blind spots, lessons. When she started her next business, she didn't chase trends or investors. She built from wisdom. 3 years later, she wasn't just successful. She was peaceful. Because she'd stopped fearing the fall. She'd learned to trust it. Why falling is a gift. The greatest irony in life is that the moments you think are destroying you are often the ones defining you. When everything goes wrong, when your plans collapse, when you're forced to start over, that's when life gives you an upgrade disguised as defeat. It teaches you patience when you want control. It teaches you courage when you want comfort. It teaches you truth when you want validation. Falling humbles you. It strips away pretense. It reminds you what actually matters, the work, the growth, the purpose, not the applause. And when you finally rise again, you rise not as the person you were, but as the person you were always meant to become. The moment you stop running from failure. We spend our lives trying to outrun failure. We stay in jobs we hate. We silence our dreams because we fear embarrassment. We play small so we never fall. But here's the secret. The moment you stop running from failure is the moment you become unstoppable. When you no longer fear the fall, you start to fly. Because risk becomes adventure, and mistakes become mastery. Every artist, athlete, leader, and visionary you admire has a graveyard of failures behind their success. The difference is, they didn't bury them, they built on them. The silent reward. Falling doesn't feel like a gift at first. It feels like heartbreak, shame, exhaustion. But time reveals the truth. The fall gave you self-awareness. It stripped away illusions and brought you face to face with who you really are. It made you braver, more compassionate, more human. That's the silent reward. You become someone who no longer breaks easily, because you've already been broken and rebuilt stronger. The fire beneath the ashes. Every great comeback starts with ashes. You don't rebuild from perfection, you rebuild from pain. You rebuild from what's left after life burns away everything that was fake, fragile, or forced. So if you've fallen, good. If you failed, even better. You're standing in the fire that forges greatness. You are being refined, not ruined. Because the truth is, falling isn't the opposite of flying. It's the training for it. Closing reflection. Every fall you've ever had, every rejection, every heartbreak, every failure, wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to show you that you could survive. The only people who never fail are the ones who never try. But those who dare, who risk, fall, rise, and keep moving, they're the ones who leave footprints deep enough for others to follow. So if you're on your knees right now, don't curse the ground, plant something there. The soil of failure grows the strongest roots. And one day, when you rise again, and you will, you'll understand that the fall was never your ending. It was your beginning. Chapter 2. When the world says no. There comes a moment in every dreamer's life when the world stops cheering. When the applause fades, the doors close, the messages go unanswered, and you're left standing alone, face to face with the cold, unshakable reality of rejection. It's the sound of someone saying, "You're not ready," or "You're not enough," or worse, silence, which somehow hurts even more. But what if that no you keep hearing isn't the end of your story? What if it's the start, the refining pressure that shapes your hunger, your character, your destiny? Because behind every success the world celebrates, there's a long, bruising trail of rejection the world forgets. And those who rise the highest aren't the ones who never heard no. They're the ones who kept walking through it. The first no hurts the most. It always does. Ask Walt Disney, who was fired from a newspaper because his editor said he lacked imagination. Ask Oprah Winfrey, who was told she was unfit for television. Ask Steven Spielberg, who was rejected from film school 3 times. Each of them heard no loud enough to make most people quit. But here's the twist. That rejection didn't close their path. It carved it. They learned something most people never do. A no from the world is often a redirection from fate. When doors close, it's not always punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Because maybe you weren't meant to fit in those rooms. Maybe you were meant to build your own. The loneliness of believing in what no one else sees. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes when you see something others don't, when your vision feels crystal clear to you, but invisible to everyone else. That's when the world's no feels personal. You tell your idea to your family. They smile politely, change the subject. You share your dream with friends. They tell you to be realistic. You put your work out there, and it's met with silence. That's the test. Not the big failure. Not the huge loss. But that quiet moment when you start asking yourself, what if they're right? What if I'm delusional? That's where 99% of dreamers stop. But the 1%, they double down. Because belief isn't easy. It's rebellion. It's choosing to hold your fire in a world that keeps trying to put it out. The story of the rejected manuscript. In 1950, a struggling writer named Jack Canfield had an idea, a collection of short, uplifting stories about everyday people overcoming challenges. He titled it Chicken Soup for the Soul. When he sent it to publishers, he was rejected 144 times. One publisher even wrote back, "Collections of feel-good stories don't sell. Try something else." But Jack refused to believe that the world's no was final. He and his co-author printed copies themselves, carrying boxes of books to local stores and small gatherings. By the time the world finally said yes, their little book had sold over 500 million copies and changed lives across the globe. Every single no had been the compost that nourished their eventual yes. The psychology of rejection. Here's what most people don't understand. Rejection isn't just an external event. It's a psychological wound. Your brain processes it the same way it processes physical pain. That's why it feels so sharp, so humiliating, so final. But the difference between those who rise and those who stay broken is how they interpret it. Some see rejection as proof they're not good enough. Others see it as proof they're in motion, proof they're trying, growing, living. Rejection doesn't mean stop. It means refine. It means the world isn't ready yet. Or maybe you aren't ready yet, but something inside you is being sharpened for the next round. The no that built a movement. Let's talk about a young woman named Malala Yousafzai. At just 15 years old, she was told no by the most brutal form of authority possible, the Taliban, who banned girls from going to school in her region of Pakistan. But Malala refused to accept that no. She wrote, spoke, protested, and nearly lost her life for her belief that education was a right, not a privilege. Years later, that same girl who had been silenced on a school bus stood on the world stage as the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate in history. Malala's story reminds us, the world's no can't silence the soul's yes. When rejection becomes direction. Let's make this personal. Think about the last time the world told you no. A job you didn't get. A dream that fell apart. A person who didn't believe in you. What if that wasn't a dead end, but a detour? What if that closed door was redirecting you to something that fit you better, something that wouldn't have found you if you'd succeeded too soon? Every no you've heard, every door that slammed in your face, was an invitation to evolve. Because success isn't about collecting yes. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need permission anymore. The quiet resilience of ordinary dreamers. Not every story of resilience makes headlines. Some unfold quietly, in everyday lives. Take Maria, a single mother who applied for over 60 jobs after losing her position during a company downsizing. Each rejection chipped at her confidence, until one night, out of desperation, she baked cookies to sell online. Within a year, her small side hustle became a thriving business, one she built from the ashes of no. No investors, no backing, just faith, flour, and persistence. When asked how she did it, she said something unforgettable. After so many people told me no, I decided to start saying yes to myself. The energy behind every rejection. Rejection has a strange alchemy. It either drains you or drives you. The difference lies in your perspective. If you see no as failure, it kills your momentum. But if you see it as feedback, it becomes fuel. When you understand that the world's no is just an opinion, not a prophecy, you stop begging for validation and start creating it. That's how visionaries are born. They stop knocking on doors that won't open and build their own house instead. The moment the world says yes. There's a moment in every underdog story when the world finally sees what you've seen all along. When the lights hit. When people start calling you lucky. But by then, you've already changed. Because the truth is, the world's yes doesn't make you who you are. Your response to its no does. Rejection taught you patience. It taught you grit. It made you resourceful, hungry, humble, and unshakable. And when success finally comes, you'll realize it wasn't the applause that made you great. It was the silence that came before it. The gift hidden in every no. When the world says no, don't see it as a door closing. See it as a mirror showing you how badly you want it. That's the gift, clarity. Because rejection doesn't just test your dream, it reveals it. You'll know if something is truly yours when you're willing to fight for it, even after the world has turned its back. And one day, when your time comes, when people finally say yes, you'll carry that strength with you. You'll remember that you didn't get here by luck or approval. You got here because you refused to stop when the world told you to. Closing reflection. Every no has power, but only if you give it meaning. Don't let it define your worth. Let it refine your purpose. Because one day, you'll look back at all the rejections, the doubts, the slammed doors, and you'll smile. You'll realize they weren't blockades, they were blueprints. Every no pointed you closer to the yes that was meant for you. So when the world says no, whisper back, watch me, and then rise, not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. Chapter 3. Cracks that let the light in. There's a moment, somewhere between breaking and rebuilding, when you finally stop fighting the fall. It's quiet, almost sacred. You look around at the pieces of what used to be your life, dreams scattered, confidence fractured, and realize something strange. The light you've been chasing all along is now seeping through the cracks. The beauty in broken things. We grow up thinking perfection is the goal. Schools reward right answers. Jobs reward flawless performance. Society applauds the highlight reel. And yet, nothing truly beautiful ever came from perfection. A seed has to crack before it grows. Glass must shatter before it can be reshaped into art. A heart has to break before it can expand enough to hold compassion. When life cracks you open, it's not cruelty, it's creation. Think of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with veins of gold. Instead of hiding the scars, they fill them with something more valuable. The cracks don't ruin the bowl, they define it. The object becomes more precious not despite the break, but because of it. That's the philosophy of this chapter. You are the kintsugi. Your scars are your gold. The moment of breaking. Take Maya, for instance. She was an ambitious young architect who poured everything into her career. After years of climbing, she was finally entrusted with a major project, the kind that could put her name on the map. And then it collapsed. Literally. Design flaws, construction errors, deadlines missed. Her reputation shattered overnight. Clients pulled out. Her firm distanced itself. Her phone went silent. For weeks, she replayed every decision, drowning in self-blame. How could I have failed? Turned into, who am I if I fail? Then one night, while staring at the half-finished blueprints spread across her floor, she noticed something. Tiny doodles she used to sketch on the edges back when designing was fun. Curves, colors, playfulness she'd lost along the way. In that moment, she realized she hadn't just lost a project. She'd lost her joy. The collapse wasn't the end. It was an invitation back to herself. Today, Maya runs her own studio. She builds community spaces filled with art and warmth, projects that carry her heart, not just her name. Her failure broke her open, and through the cracks, her real purpose entered. The psychology of cracks. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the transformation that follows adversity. It's the idea that struggle doesn't just make us tougher, it makes us truer. People who've faced major failures often end up more grounded, more empathetic, and more aligned with their real values. But it doesn't happen automatically. Growth requires acceptance, the willingness to stop pretending everything is fine. When you hide your pain, you also hide your potential. Cracks are not weaknesses to conceal. They are places where truth seeps in. When you say, I'm not okay, you open the door for connection. When you admit, I failed, you begin to see how you can rise. The world worships strength, but true strength is found in vulnerability. Every broken place inside you is a chance for light to enter. The light of empathy. Failure humbles us. It strips away ego and replaces it with empathy. When you've fallen, you recognize the look in someone else's eyes when they fall. That's what happened to Jordan, a former athlete who blew out his knee right before qualifying for nationals. His career was over, and for months he isolated himself, angry, ashamed, lost. One day, while rehabbing, he met a teenager struggling with the same injury. Without thinking, Jordan started helping him train, sharing tips and hope. That mentorship turned into a career. Jordan now coaches young athletes recovering from setbacks. He once said, "When my body broke, my heart opened." That's the light that enters through the crack. Shattered dreams, stronger souls. Some of the most powerful human beings in history have been shattered. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, yet emerged without bitterness, using those years to forge patience and inner peace that changed a nation. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first television job and told she wasn't fit for TV. That failure carved out the empathy that became the foundation of her storytelling empire. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter as a single mother on welfare after facing rejection from 12 publishers. Her brokenness became the ink that birthed worlds. Each of them carries a golden seam, the evidence of transformation. They didn't rise in spite of their cracks, they rose through them, learning to see the light. When you're in the middle of failure, it's hard to believe anything good can come from it. The pain is too real, the loss too close. But if you look closer, there's always a flicker, a lesson, a connection, a redirection. Sometimes the job that ends forces you toward the career you were meant for. Sometimes the heartbreak that breaks you teaches you what real love is. Sometimes the rejection that wounds your ego saves your soul. The light is always there. You just have to stop staring at the darkness long enough to notice it. A personal reflection. If you're reading this feeling like you're in pieces, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath. Look at those cracks not as proof that you're broken, but that you've been alive. You cared enough to try. You were brave enough to dream. You risked enough to fail. Those cracks mean you've lived. And now they mean you're ready to grow. The most beautiful people you'll ever meet are not the ones who have never fallen. They're the ones who learned how to rise beautifully, carrying their scars like medals, not wounds. The light is you. Here's the twist. The light that seeps through your cracks isn't from the outside. It's you. It's your soul refusing to dim. It's your resilience glowing through every fracture. It's proof that what was meant to destroy you only made you transparent enough for your brilliance to shine. When the world sees your cracks, don't hide them. Let them see the gold that holds you together. Failure will happen. Hearts will break. Dreams will fall apart. But remember this truth. Nothing that breaks you can define you unless you stop rising. Every crack is a doorway. Every fall is an opening. Through those openings, light finds you, then grows within you, until one day, you become the light for someone else. That's the gift of falling. That's the magic of imperfection. That's how broken things become whole again. So don't rush to fix your cracks. Honor them. They are proof that your light found a way through. Chapter 4. Redefining failure. Failure. It's a word heavy with shame, soaked in disappointment, and shadowed by fear. For most of us, it's the ghost that follows every ambition, whispering that we're not enough, that we'll never make it, that trying is dangerous because falling hurts. But what if failure isn't the villain we think it is? What if, instead, it's the teacher, the patient, ruthless, necessary mentor that shapes greatness from raw potential? We've been taught to fear failure, but maybe it's time to redefine it. The lie we learned early. It starts young. The first time we get a bad grade, we're told we failed. The first time we miss the shot, forget the line, or come home with less than perfect, we see the look of disappointment on someone's face, and the message is clear. Failure equals unworthiness. That's the lie. We internalize it, carry it into adulthood, and let it govern our courage. We don't start the business because we might fail. We don't tell someone we love them because rejection might sting. We don't chase the dream because failure might expose us. So we live safe, predictable, small. But here's the truth that life whispers to those brave enough to listen. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the soil it grows in. Every empire was built on broken plans. Every masterpiece was born of mistakes. Every legend was once a beginner, fumbling through uncertainty. The redefinition begins. To redefine failure, you first have to strip it of its shame. Failure is not evidence that you're unworthy. It's evidence that you're alive, that you stepped into the arena, that you tried something bold enough to have an outcome. As Thomas Edison famously said after thousands of unsuccessful attempts to invent the light bulb, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That mindset changed everything, because he didn't measure failure as defeat, but as data. Every misstep became instruction. Every mistake became direction. That's how visionaries think. They don't take failure personally. They take it seriously. The story of Amir. Let me tell you about Amir. He grew up in a small city, the kind of place where dreams were considered dangerous luxuries. His father ran a local mechanic shop, and Amir was expected to take it over. But Amir loved music, not just playing it, but feeling it. When he turned 21, he took all his savings and recorded an album. He poured every emotion, every memory, every ounce of his soul into it. It flopped. Barely 50 people bought it. Critics ignored it. His father said, "Now you've learned. Time to get real." But Amir couldn't stop hearing melodies in his mind. So he tried again and again. For 8 years, he failed. Small crowds, empty venues, nights playing for tips. Then one evening, while performing in a dim cafe, someone recorded him singing a song called "Falling Forward." The video went viral. Within a year, Amir was performing on global stages. When a journalist later asked him, "What changed? What was the turning point?" he smiled and said, "Nothing changed. I just stopped calling it failure." He explained that every flop taught him how to listen better, write better, connect deeper. Every empty seat was a lesson in patience. Every no carved humility into his heart. I didn't fail 8 years, he said. I trained for 8 years. The rehearsal room of greatness. Failure is rehearsal. That's all it is. Behind every success story, there's a rehearsal room full of wrong notes, missed lines, broken attempts, and late nights that nobody saw. Michael Jordan missed over 9,000 shots in his career. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he founded. Walt Disney was told he lacked imagination. Beyoncé lost a major singing competition before Destiny's Child even existed. Failure is the soundcheck before the concert, the storm before the sunrise, the scar before the strength. When you fail, it doesn't mean you're off the path. It means you're on it. The failure spectrum. There's a secret most people don't realize. Not all failures are equal. There are 2 types. 1, the failure of effort, and 2, the failure of avoidance. The first comes from trying, from taking the shot, risking the fall, stepping forward into the unknown. This kind of failure builds resilience, knowledge, and strength. It's the failure that moves you closer to mastery. The second type, the failure of avoidance, comes from fear, from not showing up, from silencing your own voice because you might look foolish. That's the kind of failure that truly destroys you, because it leaves you wondering what could have been. You can recover from the first kind. It teaches, it heals, it refines you. But the second kind haunts you. It's the failure that lives in the word almost. So if you must fail, and you will, fail trying, fail building, fail forward. The emotional alchemy of failure. There's something almost mystical about how failure reshapes the human spirit. It takes pride and turns it into humility. It takes arrogance and replaces it with understanding. It takes self-doubt and transforms it into awareness. In those moments when everything falls apart, when you're standing in the ashes of what used to be your dream, your soul begins to whisper truths it couldn't before. That you are more than your achievements. That you are not defined by applause. That you can rebuild, not as who you were, but as who you're meant to be. Failure doesn't destroy your purpose. It reveals it. The mirror test. Ask yourself this. If you lost everything tomorrow, your job, your title, your validation, who would you be? If your answer terrifies you, that's not a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're attached to the wrong things. Failure strips away illusions. It takes your identity, shakes it, and asks, are you still enough without your trophies? When you redefine failure, you begin to see that the loss of what you thought you needed often clears the path for what you truly deserve. From fear to fuel. Most people stop at fear. They mistake the discomfort of failure for danger and retreat. But fear is not a wall. It's a signal. It tells you that you're expanding, that you're in motion. When you start to use failure as feedback, everything changes. You stop saying, I can't do this, and start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That's the shift from being a victim of failure to becoming its student. That's how you build what I call failure resilience. The ability to keep going not despite falling, but because you understand falling is part of the process. The turning point of perspective. There's a story about a man who once asked a sculptor, how did you create such a perfect lion from a block of marble? The sculptor smiled and said, I simply removed everything that wasn't the lion. That's what failure does. It chips away the unnecessary, the ego, the impatience, the illusion, until what remains is the truth of who you are. When you fail, you're not losing, you're being refined. The process hurts because transformation always does, but each failure brings you closer to clarity. A moment of stillness. Take a moment right now. Think about a time you failed, really failed. The kind of fall that left you breathless. Now ask yourself, what did that failure teach you that success never could? What strength did it give you? What clarity did it carve? If you look closely, you'll realize that failure didn't break you. It introduced you to yourself. The light hidden in the word fail. Here's something most people never notice. The word fail can stand for something powerful. First, attempt. In. Learning. It's not the end, it's the beginning. Every no hides a not yet. Every collapse hides construction. Every ending hides evolution. Redefining failure means learning to read its secret language, the one that says, this is not rejection. This is redirection. The power of persistence. There's an invisible bridge between failure and success. It's called persistence. The world doesn't belong to the talented. It belongs to the relentless. Those who keep showing up after rejection. Those who keep creating when no one's watching. Those who understand that failure is not fatal. It's feedback. Every time you fail and choose to rise again, you train the world to take you seriously. Because the universe doesn't reward perfection, it rewards consistency. The redefinition complete. So what is failure really? It's not proof of your weakness. It's the evidence of your courage. Failure is your story's heartbeat. It's the rhythm between effort and evolution. It's the shadow that gives shape to your light. When you redefine failure, you stop being afraid of falling and start being afraid of not trying. Because there's something far worse than failure, and that's a life unlived. A letter to the reader. If you're reading this right now, heavy with disappointment, replaying mistakes, or mourning a dream that didn't work out, let this chapter whisper to you. You are not failing. You are forging. The fire that feels like destruction is actually purification. The pain that feels like punishment is preparation. You're not behind. You're being built. Someday, you'll look back and see that what you called failure was simply the forge in which your strength was born. So redefine it. Reclaim it. Let failure be your foundation, not your fear. Because every great life, every world changer, dreamer, artist, entrepreneur, and believer has one thing in common. They failed forward. And so will you. Chapter 5. Standing Tall in the Rubble. The silence after collapse is deafening. When the dust settles, when the world stops spinning, when the plans you built with such faith lie shattered at your feet, that's when the real test begins. Most people think failure hurts because of what's lost. But the truth is, what destroys us isn't the loss itself. It's the belief that we can never rebuild. Yet those who rise higher, those who become legends of resilience, are the ones who learn to stand tall in the rubble. They don't pretend the pain isn't real. They feel it. They face it. And then, brick by broken brick, they start to build again. The moment everything collapses. Everyone has a breaking point. That night, that phone call, that moment when everything changes. For some, it's a career that vanishes overnight. For others, it's a dream that dies slowly, painfully, despite all their effort. Think of J.K. Rowling, sitting in a small Edinburgh cafe, a single mother living on welfare, rejected by 12 publishers who told her no one would read about a boy wizard. Her world was rubble, a life that hadn't gone the way she imagined. But she wrote anyway. Through tears, fear, and hunger, she kept writing. The rubble became her foundation, and the world later called it Harry Potter. Or Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, 27 years of silence, of confinement, of watching life go on without him. The rubble for him was not only personal, it was the ruins of a nation torn apart by hate. But he didn't let the rubble bury him. He studied, he reflected, he grew stronger. When the gates finally opened, he walked out not with bitterness, but with the calm power of a man who had rebuilt himself from the inside out. When the rubble is personal, it's easy to admire those stories from afar, but what about your own? What about the moments no one applauds, the nights when no one sees your tears? There's a man named Rashid, a construction worker from Karachi. He dreamed of starting his own small building company. He saved for years, took loans, and finally opened a tiny workshop. Within months, a storm destroyed his materials and his shop roof caved in. He sat there in the rubble, watching everything he worked for collapse. People told him to quit. It wasn't meant for you, they said. But he didn't. Rashid started again, working night shifts, collecting scrap materials to rebuild. 3 years later, his company was repairing homes across the city. The rubble taught me what no book could, he said. It taught me I am stronger than what I lost. That's the hidden truth. Failure doesn't destroy you. It introduces you to yourself. The psychology of rebuilding. When psychologists study post-traumatic growth, they often find something paradoxical. People who have endured the most loss often emerge more resilient, more compassionate, and more grounded than before. Why? Because when everything you thought you needed is stripped away, what remains is clarity. You start to see what really matters, your values, your strength, your capacity to begin again. Think of the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they're illuminated. The idea is that when something breaks and is repaired, it becomes more beautiful, not despite the scars, but because of them. Our lives are the same. When you rebuild after a fall, you don't return to who you were before. You become stronger, wiser, more unshakable. The quiet power of acceptance. Before you rebuild, you must accept what's been lost. That's the hardest part. The mind wants to replay the old scenes. What if I hadn't failed? What if they had believed in me? But growth begins the moment you stop asking why me and start asking what now. Every great comeback in history started with that simple shift. When Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he built, he could have become bitter. Instead, he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. The heaviness of being successful, he said, was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. He started again, and that beginner became the visionary who revolutionized technology, music, and design. Rebuilding is never glamorous. Here's what most motivational speeches won't tell you. Rebuilding is ugly. It's waking up tired. It's working while you're still unsure. It's choosing to keep faith when the world still doubts you. But it's also the most sacred work a person can do, because it's where your soul learns endurance. Take Bethany Hamilton, the surfer who lost her arm in a shark attack. She could have walked away from the ocean forever. Instead, she returned. Every wave became a battle, every victory a symbol. She rebuilt not only her technique, but her identity. Today, she inspires millions because she proved that no loss is final unless you surrender to it. The ordinary heroes among us. You don't need to be a celebrity to embody this strength. There's a teacher who keeps showing up for her students even after losing her husband. There's a teenager rebuilding his confidence after failing his exams. There's a father who, after losing his job, starts driving a rickshaw to feed his family but still tells his children, "We are rich because we still have hope." These are the quiet rebuilders, the ones whose names we may never know, but whose courage keeps the world alive. The blueprint for rising again. If you're standing in your own rubble right now, career broken, heart shattered, dreams delayed, here's what you must remember. 1. Don't rush the rebuild. Sit with the pain until it becomes your teacher. 2. Start with what's left, not with what's lost. There's always something to build on. A skill, a passion, a spark. 3. Forgive yourself. You did your best with what you knew. Now, you know more. 4. Surround yourself with those who still believe. Even one supportive voice can silence 100 doubts. 5. Trust the slow rise. True strength is built in quiet, unseen moments. Every brick you lay in the aftermath becomes a story someone else will someday need. Rising from the ashes. In the end, standing tall in the rubble isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about proving that you are unbreakable, even when broken. It's about looking at what's left and whispering, "This is enough to begin again." The rubble isn't your grave. It's your raw material. It's the soil where resilience grows, the canvas where the next masterpiece begins. So stand tall, not because everything is perfect, but because you survived the fall, and now you know how to rise. Chapter 6. The Power of Falling Forward. There's a strange kind of power hidden inside every fall. It doesn't feel like power when you're lying on the floor, heartbroken, humiliated, and wondering how to start again. It feels like defeat, like your story just ended. But if you look closer, beneath the pain and the silence, there's movement. Something inside you is still alive, whispering, "Get up," not to go back, but to go forward. That's the essence of falling forward. Using your failures as fuel instead of letting them become final. When falling becomes the first step, every dreamer, every builder, every world changer has one thing in common. They fell hard, but they didn't stay there. They learned to fall forward. Think of Thomas Edison, who made 1,000 unsuccessful attempts before inventing the light bulb. When asked how it felt to fail 1,000 times, he replied calmly, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." That's the mindset of falling forward. Every failure is not the end of your story. It's a direction, a compass showing where not to go and how to improve. Or look at Michael Jordan, the man who became the symbol of athletic greatness. He once said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed." He didn't avoid failure. He trained with it. Every loss became a lesson. Every miss became momentum. Falling forward is a decision. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Failure doesn't make you stronger by itself. Time doesn't heal by itself. What heals you is how you respond. You can fall and choose to stay bitter, or you can fall forward and use the energy of that fall to launch yourself ahead. The difference lies in mindset. A fall can either break you or break open something within you. A young entrepreneur named Sarah, from Lahore, once poured her entire savings into a cafe. Within 6 months, a chain coffee shop opened across the street. Her business died before it even began. For weeks, she couldn't sleep. Friends pitted her. Her family told her to play it safe. But instead of quitting, she studied why she failed: her pricing, her menu, her marketing. 2 years later, she opened a new cafe, this time on her own terms. She built a brand around community, affordable comfort, and kindness. That cafe became a city favorite. "The first failure was my education," she said. "It was tuition I didn't know I was paying." That's the secret. Every fall is tuition. You're paying for wisdom that no classroom could ever teach. The science of moving through failure. Psychologists call it resilient reframing, the ability to reinterpret your pain so it becomes progress. When you fall forward, you're rewiring your brain to associate failure with learning, not shame. This is how emotional endurance is built. You begin to see rejection not as personal, but as directional. You begin to view mistakes not as evidence of weakness, but as proof that you're in motion. Falling forward is about building a growth mindset so strong that even when life knocks you flat, you land facing the future, not the past. The world's greatest comebacks began with a fall. Look at Walt Disney, fired from his newspaper job because he lacked imagination. He went bankrupt before Disneyland ever opened. The irony? The man who was told he had no imagination went on to create entire worlds from it. Look at Oprah Winfrey, who was fired from her first TV job because she was deemed unfit for television. That rejection became her redirection. She built one of the most powerful media empires in history. Or think about Colonel Sanders, who started KFC in his 60s. Before that, he was rejected over 1,000 times when trying to sell his recipe. But each no taught him how to refine his pitch, how to persevere, and how to fall forward. The power of the fall itself. The fall humbles you. It strips away ego. It makes you honest. In success, people rarely reflect, but in failure, you are forced to look in the mirror. That's why the fall is powerful. It reminds you that growth doesn't happen when everything goes right. It happens when you confront everything that went wrong and keep going anyway. When life knocks you down, your posture doesn't define you. Your direction does. If you fall forward, you're still moving toward your goal. You may not be running, but you're progressing. Real stories of falling forward. Aisha's story, ordinary hero. Aisha, a university student, dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. She applied to top schools, was rejected by all. Devastated, she started creating small handmade clothing items and selling them online. Her first collection failed, barely any sales. But she learned about marketing, photography, and storytelling. By her third collection, one of her designs went viral. Now, her small brand employs 10 women. "If I hadn't failed the first 2 times," she says, "I would have never discovered how strong my vision really was." Sylvester Stallone, famous hero. He was broke, homeless, rejected over 1,000 times for his script Rocky. He refused to sell the script unless he could star in it, despite everyone saying he looked wrong for Hollywood. He fell again and again, until one day, someone said yes. Rocky won an Oscar. The man who couldn't pay rent became a symbol of perseverance for millions. The turning point, choosing the direction of your fall. Every person faces a moment, one brutal, honest moment, where they have to choose. Do I let this define me, or do I use it to refine me? You can't control if life knocks you down, but you can control if you face backward or forward when you land. You can turn regret into rehearsal, practicing how not to fall the same way twice. You can turn fear into focus, using the pain as momentum. Falling forward means refusing to let your last failure write your final chapter. What falling forward teaches? 1. Humility. You learn that success doesn't make you invincible, it makes you human. 2. Perspective. You begin to value process over perfection. 3. Endurance. You develop inner strength that comfort could never teach. 4. Empathy. Once you've fallen, you understand others' pain better, and you lift them when they fall. 5. Creativity. You start finding new paths because the old ones no longer exist. Falling forward teaches that every scar is a map, proof that you didn't quit when it hurt. From pain to purpose. The truth is, failure is not your enemy. Comfort is. Comfort tells you to stop trying. Comfort tells you to avoid the fall. But comfort also kills growth. Falling forward is about trading safety for strength. It's about trusting that the fall itself will teach you what the top never could. When failure becomes movement, your destiny changes. You stop fearing the fall and start using it as fuel. The power within the phrase. Fail forward is not just a slogan. It's a philosophy. It means every mistake has momentum in it, if you choose to look for it. Your fall today could be the reason someone else dares tomorrow. Because every comeback starts with a collapse. Every rebirth starts with a breakdown. Every success story begins with someone who refused to stop moving forward, even when it hurt. The final word. So if you're in the rubble again, breathe. You haven't failed. You've just fallen forward. Don't look back. Don't freeze. Don't let the pain convince you that you're done. Use it. Learn from it. Move through it. Because you are not defined by how many times you fall. You are defined by how beautifully you rise and how boldly you fall forward. Chapter 7. Lessons failure teaches that success never will. There are classrooms that teach facts. There are mentors who teach methods. And then there is failure, the teacher that doesn't speak, doesn't comfort, and doesn't grade on mercy. Failure doesn't hand you a diploma, it hands you a mirror. It forces you to look into your own reflection and ask, who am I when everything I thought I was falls apart? Because what success gives an applause, failure gives an understanding. And if you listen, really listen, failure whispers lessons that success never could. The silent teacher. Success tells you, you've made it. Failure asks, do you deserve it? Success makes you comfortable. Failure makes you conscious. It's the friction that builds resilience, the silence that strengthens character. It's where the soul learns to breathe again, not in the ease of winning, but in the echo of losing. When the noise of achievement fades and all that's left is the sound of your own heartbeat, that's when you meet your truest self. That's where wisdom lives. Lesson 1. Failure teaches you who you are. When success smiles on you, everyone claps. When failure hits, the room goes silent. And in that silence, you discover who's really standing beside you and who's standing within you. That's when your voice matters most. Because failure doesn't only strip away illusions about others, it removes your illusions about yourself. You realize how much strength you are hiding. You learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Ask Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years behind bars, stripped of freedom, stripped of power. Yet he emerged not bitter, but better, carrying forgiveness instead of revenge. Prison taught him what politics never could, that leadership begins within. Failure taught him that true power is not in control, but in character. That's the kind of transformation success will never demand, because comfort never forces you to rebuild your soul. Lesson 2. Failure teaches you to listen. In success, your voice gets louder. In failure, the world goes quiet, and you start to hear things you missed before. You hear your doubts, your wounds, your deeper purpose. You start to hear the lessons life's been trying to teach you all along. When J.K. Rowling was a single mother, broke and on the verge of giving up, she said failure gave her the gift of clarity. I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was, and began to direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me. Had success come earlier, she might have never written Harry Potter. Failure gave her the focus that fame never could. Sometimes, you have to lose everything that doesn't matter to finally hear what does. Lesson 3. Failure teaches gratitude. When everything is stripped away, money, status, validation, and yet you're still breathing, you begin to understand gratitude differently. Success makes you grateful for. Failure makes you grateful to be. That's a sacred shift. A man named David, an athlete from Nairobi, trained for years to qualify for the Olympics. On the final trial, he tripped, breaking his ankle. His dream ended in seconds. For months, he couldn't walk. But as he healed, he began volunteering at a local school, coaching young runners. Years later, one of those kids stood on an Olympic podium. David said, "I never reached the finish line I trained for, but I reached one I didn't know existed." Failure didn't take his purpose, it redirected it. And that redirection was a gift disguised as loss. Lesson 4. Failure builds depth, not just strength. Success adds layers to your life. Failure adds depth to your soul. You stop chasing surface victories, followers, titles, applause, and start seeking substance, peace, authenticity, and meaning. When you fall and survive, you develop empathy. You understand struggle in others. You stop judging and start connecting. Because once you've been broken, you can see beauty in other broken people too. You stop saying, "I know how you feel," and start saying, "I've been there." That shift, from comparison to compassion, is what makes a person truly human. And no success story can teach that better than failure can. Lesson 5. Failure teaches the art of beginning again. Success celebrates the finish line. Failure teaches the courage to stand up again. Sometimes slower, sometimes wiser, but always stronger. There's a quiet nobility in starting over. It's not glamorous. It's not loud, but it's real. Every person who has ever achieved something extraordinary has fallen and started again, quietly, when nobody was watching. Steve Jobs was fired from his own company, Apple, the company he built from his garage. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. When he returned years later, he brought not only innovation, but humility, and changed the world again. Falling made him free to create without fear. Failure gave him permission to be reborn. Lesson 6. Failure teaches you what truly matters. When life collapses, your priorities rearrange themselves. The noise fades. The essentials rise. You realize that most of what you were chasing wasn't happiness, it was distraction. Failure cleans your soul like a storm cleans the sky. It clears the clutter. It returns you to what's real. Love, purpose, growth, inner peace. When everything else falls away, those are the only things left standing. Lesson 7. Failure teaches humility, the gateway to greatness. Humility is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the awareness that you are always learning, always unfinished. Failure humbles you in ways success never can. It teaches you that life is not a race to be won. It's a rhythm to be lived. Humility opens your heart to others. It turns your story into service. That's why some of the greatest souls in history, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Mandela, wore their humility like armor. They fell many times, but they rose with grace, not arrogance. Because they understood that falling doesn't disqualify you from greatness, it prepares you for it. Lesson 8. Failure teaches that growth is messy. We all love stories of triumph, but rarely do we love the process that makes them possible. The truth is, growth looks nothing like the movies. It's tears in the dark, messy journal pages, sleepless nights, and small, unseen progress. Success is polished. Failure is honest. And in honesty, there is transformation. It's the messy middle, between the fall and the rise, where real change happens. That's where your heart breaks open, and light starts to pour in. Lesson 9. Failure teaches you to detach from perfection. Perfection is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. Failure breaks that illusion. When you fail publicly, you lose your image, and what's left is your essence. You stop chasing flawless, and start chasing fearless. That's when art becomes real, love becomes deeper, and life becomes authentic. Every artist, every innovator, every dreamer who changed the world did so imperfectly. Because perfection impresses, but imperfection connects. Lesson 10. Failure teaches that you are enough. Perhaps the most profound lesson failure teaches is this. Even without the win, you are worthy. Even without applause, you are valuable. Even without validation, you have meaning. Failure forces you to separate your worth from your work. You start to understand that being broken doesn't mean being unworthy. It means being alive. That realization is liberation. It's the foundation of self-belief that no success can ever shake. The paradox of failure. Failure is the end of something you wanted, but the beginning of something you needed. It feels like destruction, but it's often the blueprint for your transformation. The broken parts of your story become the very lines that define your strength. The cracks become the places where wisdom seeps in. Every great life is built from moments that look like endings, but were really beginnings in disguise. Final reflection. If success is the celebration, failure is the education. If success builds your life, failure builds your soul. So don't curse your failures. Study them. Let them teach you. Let them strip away the noise, the ego, the fear, until what's left is truth. Because one day, you'll look back and realize the lessons that shaped you most didn't come from the times you won. They came from the times you fell and refused to stay down. Chapter 8. The Fear of Trying Again. There's a silence that follows failure. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. The kind that hums with unspoken questions. What if I mess up again? What if I'm not strong enough this time? What if I've already had my chance? That silence becomes a prison. And inside it, thousands of dreams die. Not because people failed, but because they never tried again. The invisible weight. Failure doesn't just break your plans. It bruises your confidence. It leaves behind ghosts that whisper every time you think of starting over. You begin doubting not your idea, but yourself. You start thinking, maybe it's safer to stay where I am. Safety becomes a cage dressed as comfort. And the longer you sit there, the harder it becomes to move. The second battle. The first battle is losing. The second battle, and the harder one, is believing you can rise again. The first time you fail, you fight the world. The second time, you fight your own reflection. Because the mind remembers pain. It remembers embarrassment. It remembers how it felt when you gave everything and still came up short. So the next time you stand before the edge of possibility, your heart races, not from excitement, but from memory. That's why courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is looking at the wreckage of your past and saying, I'm still willing to build again. The fear of the repeat. Fear after failure is not irrational, it's protective. It's your brain's way of saying, don't get hurt again. But healing begins when you gently reply, I'm not the same person who fell last time. Because you're not. You carry lessons now, scars that remind you where to tread carefully and where to stand firm. Every failure changed your internal architecture. You've grown roots in the places you once broke. The perfection trap. After failing, many people swing to the other extreme, perfectionism. They tell themselves, I'll try again when I'm ready. But ready becomes a mirage. There's always another skill to learn, another excuse to polish. So they prepare endlessly, plan obsessively, and never leap. That's the cruel irony of fear. It disguises itself as preparation. But at its core, it's procrastination fueled by pain. Story 1. The pianist who stopped playing. There was once a gifted pianist. Let's call her Elena. By age 19, she'd won national competitions, performed on global stages, and carried the pressure of brilliance. But at one concert, under the blinding lights of Vienna's Grand Hall, her mind went blank. Her fingers froze. The melody vanished. For a moment that felt like eternity, silence filled the air. When she finally stumbled through the piece, she walked off the stage trembling, humiliated, shattered. She didn't touch a piano for 3 years. Not because she didn't love music, but because she loved it too much to fail again. Then one evening, she wandered into a small bar where an old man played a half-broken piano with the joy of a child. When she asked why he played despite missing so many notes, he smiled and said, Because I don't play to be perfect, I play to feel alive. That night, she went home, sat before her dusty piano, and began to play. Imperfectly, softly, tearfully. And in those imperfect notes, she found freedom again. Fear doesn't end, it evolves. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. It's to transform your relationship with it. Fear is information. It's a compass that says, something meaningful lies beyond this point. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't fearless. They just refuse to let fear make their decisions for them. As Michael Jordan once said after missing over 9,000 shots, I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. He didn't escape fear. He trained with it. He made failure his sparring partner, not his enemy. The psychology of trying again. Psychologists call it learned helplessness. When repeated failures convince you that no matter what you do, you can't change the outcome. It's why some people stop applying for jobs after a few rejections. Why writers stop submitting manuscripts. Why dreamers stop dreaming. But here's what they don't tell you. Helplessness isn't learned, it's conditioned. And what's conditioned can be unlearned. Every small act of courage, sending one more email, taking one more step, writing one more page, begins rewiring your brain for hope. Story 2. The Factory Worker and the Second Chance. In Detroit during the 1980s, a young factory worker named Carl was laid off after 20 years on the job. He was 45, with no degree and 3 kids. The humiliation cut deep. For months, he drifted, too proud to take lesser work, too scared to fail again. Then one day, while fixing his neighbor's car, someone offered him a job as a small-time mechanic. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't secure. But it was a start. Fast forward 10 years. Carl owned 3 auto repair shops, employing dozens of people who'd once been laid off just like him. When asked what changed his life, he said, "The moment I stopped seeing failure as proof I wasn't good enough and started seeing it as proof I was still trying." That shift, from shame to courage, is the rebirth point. Failure breaks the ego and rebuilds the soul. One reason we fear trying again is ego. We don't want to face people who saw us fall. We don't want to risk looking foolish again. But ego protects comfort, not growth. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is, "Yes, I failed. Yes, I'm here again. Watch me rise anyway." Because every comeback begins with defiance. When the fear is personal. Sometimes, it's not career, it's heart. The fear of loving again after betrayal. The fear of trusting after being abandoned. The fear of believing after being lied to. But the same rule applies. Healing doesn't happen by hiding. It happens by opening your heart again, even if it trembles. Because courage isn't being unafraid. It's loving, creating, believing, despite the fear. Story 3. The Marathon Runner Who Walked. A woman named Sophia trained for months to run a marathon for her late brother. Halfway through, her knee gave out. She limped, cried, and nearly quit. But she remembered why she started. Not to win, but to finish. So she walked the last 8 miles. Not running, walking. Not triumphant, determined. When she crossed the finish line, people cheered louder for her than for the winners. Because what inspired them wasn't her speed, it was her spirit. Trying again doesn't always mean sprinting. Sometimes it means walking through pain, but walking still. The fire of renewal. Every again, you dare to try adds to your strength. Each comeback reshapes your story. Trying again is not about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. Because the first time you tried, you had hope. The second time, you have wisdom. And wisdom burns brighter than fear. How to try again, even when you're terrified. 1. Name the fear. Speak it. Write it. Don't let it live nameless in your mind. Naming fear reduces its power. 2. Redefine success. Your goal isn't to win again, it's to try again. That's where the real victory begins. 3. Start small. Momentum is built, not granted. Take one step, then another, then another. 4. Forgive the old you. Stop punishing yourself for who you were when you fell. That version of you gave everything they had. Honor them and move forward. 5. Visualize the after. Picture yourself standing tall after the next attempt. Feel it. Believe it. The brain follows the pictures you give it. The courage of once more. Every legend you've ever admired, from Edison to Oprah, from Ollie to Rowling, had to whisper those 2 words to themselves. Once more. Once more, I'll rise. Once more, I'll believe. Once more, I'll give this everything I have. That's the true heartbeat of greatness. Not never falling, but never letting the last fall define the rest of your story. Closing reflection. Fear after failure is normal, but letting it decide your destiny, that's optional. You don't have to be fearless to begin again. You just have to be willing. Because somewhere inside that fear lives the same spark that made you try the first time. And this time, it burns brighter, not in naivete, but in strength. So stand up, dust off your knees, look the past in the eye and whisper, "You taught me well, but I'm not done yet." And take that next step, not because you know you'll win, but because you've learned that trying again is victory enough. Chapter 9. Unseen Comebacks. The Hidden Stories of Resilience. The world loves success stories, the standing ovations, the trophies, the highlight reels. But what the world rarely sees are the nights of silence before the applause, the doubts that drown the dream, the failures that almost broke the spirit. Behind every triumph is a comeback no one saw coming. And sometimes, the most powerful part of a hero's story isn't the win. It's the fall that taught them how to fight. The truth about rising. Resilience isn't built when everything's working. It's forged in the fire when nothing is. It's not a skill. It's a spirit. And the spirit of resilience has one defining trait. It doesn't stay down. It gets bruised. It gets humiliated. It gets rejected. And somehow, it still whispers, "Not yet. I'm not done." The unseen comebacks, the ones that happened in silence, in tears, in solitude, are the real fuel behind greatness. Let's open that curtain and meet the warriors who refused to let failure write their final chapter. 1. The writer who was told she'd never make it. In the 1990s, a single mother sat in a small cafe in Edinburgh, her baby sleeping beside her, as she scribbled stories on napkins. Her marriage had failed. She was jobless, surviving on welfare. When she sent her manuscript to publishers, 12 rejected her without even reading past the first chapter. One editor even said, "Children's books don't sell anymore." But she kept writing, not because she saw success ahead, but because she couldn't bear to live without her imagination. That woman was J.K. Rowling. And the story she wrote on those cafe napkins became Harry Potter, a billion-dollar empire and a global legacy of hope, courage, and magic. But her real victory wasn't fame. It was that she kept believing in something before anyone else did. Resilience isn't about never being rejected, it's about writing your story anyway. 2. The boxer who refused to stay down. In 1974, the world watched one of the greatest boxing matches ever, Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman, the Rumble in the Jungle. Everyone said Ali was done. Too old, too slow, too outmatched. He'd already lost his title, faced political persecution for refusing to fight in Vietnam, and been banned from boxing for nearly 4 years during his prime. But Ali had something his opponents didn't, a comeback mentality. As he leaned against the ropes that night in Zaire, absorbing blow after blow, commentators called it madness. They didn't realize he was executing a strategy, the rope-a-dope. He let Foreman tire himself out, then unleashed a storm in the 8th round. And when he knocked out Foreman, reclaiming his title, he didn't just win a fight. He rewrote the definition of resilience. Ali proved that resilience isn't brute strength, it's strategic patience under pressure. 3. The businessman who lost it all, twice. Before Apple became one of the most iconic brands on the planet, its founder Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. Imagine being told you're no longer good enough for the dream you built. For a time, he was crushed. He felt directionless, embarrassed, forgotten. But in his exile, Jobs created Next and helped launch Pixar, which revolutionized animation with Toy Story. When Apple eventually bought Next, Jobs returned, older, wiser, and more visionary than ever. And from that second chapter came the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad, innovations that changed the world. He later said in a speech at Stanford, "Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith." Jobs' comeback was not fueled by revenge, it was fueled by rediscovery. 4. The teacher who became a legend. Long before he became the symbol of persistence, Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times while trying to invent the light bulb. When a journalist asked him how it felt to fail that many times, he replied, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." He reframed failure into process, and that mindset lit the modern world, literally. Edison's story reminds us that every breakthrough has 1,000 silent breakdowns behind it. 5. The ordinary comeback, Maria's story. But let's step away from fame for a moment, because resilience doesn't just live in history books. It lives in people like Maria. Maria was a single mother of 2, working double shifts as a cleaner after her small bakery business collapsed during the pandemic. Debt piled up, friends disappeared, and she nearly lost her home. But instead of giving up, she started baking again, from her kitchen, with a cheap oven and an Instagram page. She posted daily pictures, shared her story honestly, and began receiving small orders from neighbors. 2 years later, her little brand, Sweet Rice, ships cookies across her country. She employs 2 women who also lost jobs during the crisis. When asked what kept her going, she said, "Because my children were watching, and I wanted them to see that broken doesn't mean finished." That's resilience, invisible, unglamorous, but world-changing in its quiet defiance. 6. The actor who slept in his car. Before he became a global icon, Sylvester Stallone was broke, rejected, and homeless. He had been turned down by more than 1,000 agents. Then he wrote a script about a small-time boxer with a big heart, Rocky. Producers offered to buy it for $300,000, but refused to cast him in the lead role. He refused to sell. He was starving, but he held on to his dream. Finally, one studio agreed, but with a small budget and him as the lead. Rocky went on to win 3 Oscars, including Best Picture. Stallone said later, "Every time I thought about quitting, I remembered what it felt like to have nothing, and I never wanted to feel that again." His resilience didn't come from victory. It came from the memory of hunger. 7. The failure that built a billionaire. Before he created Alibaba, Jack Ma was rejected from over 30 jobs, including KFC. He failed his university entrance exams twice. He applied to Harvard 10 times and was rejected every time. But he never stopped learning. He kept asking questions, studying others, dreaming bigger. Today, his story is taught in business schools around the world, not because he succeeded, but because he never stopped trying. Jack Ma once said, "If you don't give up, you still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure." 8. The comeback you haven't seen yet. Yours. Every person reading this chapter has a comeback story forming right now. You might not see it yet. You might just feel the ache, the disappointment, the fatigue. But resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Just one more day." You're living through the same silent process that every legend once did. The confusion before clarity, the rejection before recognition. If you're struggling right now, it's not proof that you're weak. It's proof that you're in the middle of your comeback. The psychology of the comeback. Resilience is the intersection of pain and purpose. It's not about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward with new wisdom. Psychologists have found that people who face adversity often develop what's called post-traumatic growth, a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, and greater courage. They become more empathetic, more determined, more real, because they've seen how fragile success can be and how powerful persistence truly is. Story 8. The student who failed his way to discovery. James Dyson, the British inventor, built 5,126 prototypes before perfecting his first vacuum cleaner. That's over 5,000 failures. When asked what kept him going, he said, "Every failure taught me something crucial, what not to do next." His product is now sold in over 70 countries. But more importantly, his story proves this. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the data that builds it. Your hidden comeback is waiting. Every setback carries a secret message. You're being reshaped. You're being tested not to prove your weakness, but to reveal your strength. The most powerful version of you is still in construction, and every failure is a brick in that foundation. So when you feel invisible, remember this. All comebacks begin unseen. The world only claps when the curtain rises. But greatness is built in the dark. Closing reflection. If you remember one thing from this chapter, let it be this. The difference between those who make it and those who almost do isn't talent, it's tenacity. You can lose everything, your job, your confidence, your friends, and still rebuild if you refuse to quit. Your failures are not your tombstones. They're your training grounds. So, don't hide your scars, they're proof you fought. Don't silence your story, someone else needs it to rise. And don't fear your next fall. It might just be the doorway to your greatest climb. Because resilience doesn't look like perfection. It looks like you, standing up one more time. Chapter 10. Turning Scars into Strength. There are 2 kinds of pain in this world. The kind that breaks you, and the kind that builds you. The first kind comes fast. It knocks you off your feet, rips away your comfort, and leaves you wondering if you'll ever breathe the same again. But the second kind, the healing pain, it creeps in quietly. It doesn't destroy, it reshapes. It doesn't erase what happened, it gives it meaning. Every scar tells a story, not of weakness, but of endurance. A scar is a wound that decided to stay, but without the pain. It's a mark that says, "I lived through that, and I'm still here." The beauty in what's broken. It's easy to romanticize strength, to imagine it as muscles, confidence, unshakable smiles. But true strength doesn't look like that. True strength looks like a trembling hand still reaching forward. It looks like a person standing again after being told they shouldn't. It looks like a scar that glows softly under the light, reminding you that healing did happen. Sometimes we spend so long hiding our scars, covering the cracks in our stories, that we forget those very marks are what make us human. The Japanese secret of kintsugi. In Japan, there is an art form called kintsugi, golden joinery. When a bowl breaks, instead of discarding it, artisans mend it with gold-infused lacquer. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted. The bowl becomes more beautiful because it was broken. The philosophy behind kintsugi says, your brokenness is not something to disguise. It's something to celebrate, because it means you've been transformed. What if we did that with ourselves? What if we stopped trying to erase what hurt us and started honoring it as proof of our evolution? The scar that changed a life, Malala's story. In 2012, a 15-year-old girl named Malala Yousafzai was shot in the head for speaking up about girls' right to education in Pakistan. The bullet could have silenced her forever, but it didn't. After her recovery, Malala didn't hide her scar. She spoke on global stages with grace, courage, and calm defiance. She said, "They thought the bullets would silence us, but they failed." Out of that silence came thousands of voices. Her scar became her microphone. Her wound became her weapon. Her pain became her platform. Malala turned what was meant to end her into the very reason the world would never forget her. That's the alchemy of resilience, turning agony into advocacy. Pain as a teacher, not an enemy. When something breaks inside you, a relationship, a dream, a belief, it's easy to see pain as punishment. But pain is also instruction. It reveals what matters most, what's worth fighting for, what you can live without. The mistake most of us make is trying to move on too fast. We rush to cover the wound instead of learning from it. But scars only form after the wound is cleaned, treated, and given time. That's why healing takes patience. You don't grow stronger by pretending it didn't hurt. You grow stronger by letting it teach you. A soldier's silent battle. There was a man named Marcus, a soldier who returned from war with more than physical wounds. He had seen loss, chaos, betrayal. The battlefield was behind him, but the real war was now inside his mind. He tried to bury it, in silence, in alcohol, in anger. But healing began the day he stopped hiding. The day he told his story to a group of other veterans and realized he wasn't alone. That's the moment his scars stopped being private pain and became shared strength. Marcus now works with trauma survivors, helping them navigate their darkness. He tells them, "Your pain has a purpose. You didn't survive for nothing." Sometimes, healing yourself becomes the medicine that heals others. From breakdown to breakthrough. Every major transformation begins with a breakdown. We crumble before we rise. We lose before we learn. When you're in the middle of it, it feels like you're being destroyed. But in truth, you're being redesigned. Think of the phoenix, a mythical bird that burns in its own flames before being reborn from the ashes. It doesn't avoid the fire. It becomes the fire. That's what real strength is, not surviving the burn, but becoming brighter because of it. The wound is where the light enters. Poet Rumi once wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." That single line explains the entire journey of human resilience. We're not meant to emerge from pain untouched. We're meant to emerge transformed. When life cracks you open, it's not cruelty. It's an opening for empathy, for wisdom, for light to get in. The most compassionate people you'll ever meet are the ones who've suffered deeply, because they understand. Their scars give them eyes that see beyond perfection and hearts that forgive easily. A musician's redemption, Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash's voice carried a kind of pain that could silence a room. Before he became an icon, he was an addict, spiraling through self-destruction, arrested multiple times, and nearly losing his life. But when he came out of that darkness, he began to sing differently. His music no longer sought fame, it sought truth. He sang to broken people because he was one of them. When asked about his lowest moments, he said, "You build on failure. You use it as a stepping stone. Close the door on the past. Don't try to forget the mistakes, but don't dwell on them either." Cash's scars gave his songs a heartbeat. His pain gave his art purpose. The psychology of strength. Modern psychology confirms what poets have always known. Pain changes the brain, but not always for the worse. When we process trauma healthily, we often develop something known as post-traumatic growth. It's not just recovery, it's rebirth. Studies show that survivors of hardship often emerge more empathetic, focused, and spiritually grounded. They value connection over perfection, presence over performance. They don't chase happiness, they cultivate meaning. Scars, it turns out, can rewire the soul toward gratitude. Ordinary heroes. Not every comeback makes headlines, but every one deserves applause. There's Elena, who lost her husband and business in the same year, but now runs grief workshops for widows. There's David, who was paralyzed after a car crash and went on to create adaptive fitness programs for others like him. There's Leah, who survived an abusive home, became a counselor, and tells every kid who walks into her office, "Your story doesn't end here." These people don't wear capes. Their heroism is quiet, daily, and sacred. They turn suffering into service. And maybe that's the highest form of strength, turning your pain into something that lessens someone else's. Your scars are your credentials. When you walk into a room, your scars speak before you do. They say, "This one has lived. This one has endured. This one knows what it means to fall and still choose love." You don't need to be flawless to inspire. You just need to be real. When you embrace your scars, emotional, mental, physical, you reclaim the power they once took from you. Because shame fades in the light of honesty, and strength begins where pretending ends. So, wear your scars like medals, not marks of shame. They're the map of where you've been, and proof you made it out. Becoming the alchemist of your own life. In ancient mythology, alchemists sought to turn lead into gold. But maybe the truest alchemy isn't found in laboratories, it's found in hearts. Turning pain into wisdom. Turning heartbreak into empathy. Turning scars into strength. You are the alchemist of your story. Every failure, every wound, every fall is raw material waiting for your touch. You can choose bitterness, or you can choose brilliance. Both are born from the same fire. The closing fire. One day, you'll look back and realize that the thing you thought would destroy you was actually the thing that rebuilt you. The moments that hurt the most taught you how to see clearly. The losses that broke your heart made room for something more true. The scars you once hid became the art that set you apart. You'll understand that strength isn't born in comfort. It's born in chaos. It's born in the nights you cried alone, but still got up in the morning. It's born in every "I can't" you turned into "I did." Your scars are not your shame. They are your signature. Proof that you survived the storm and still have fire in your eyes. So lift your head, trace the lines of your story, and know this: you are not defined by what hurt you, but by how you healed. Because those who rise from the ashes don't just survive. They shine. Chapter 11. Failing forward together. When we fall, the world often teaches us to fall alone. Hide your pain. Smile through it. Don't let them see you bleed. But what if, instead of crawling away from each other in shame, we reached toward each other in truth? What if the power to rise higher wasn't found in solo strength, but in shared struggle? Because here's the truth no one tells you. Healing is contagious. Resilience multiplies when shared. And sometimes the only thing stronger than a person who refuses to give up is a community that refuses to let each other fall. The myth of the lone warrior. Society glorifies the self-made hero, the lone wolf who beats the odds alone. But that myth hides the truth. No one ever really rises alone. Every self-made story is actually a chain of unseen kindness, mentorship, faith, and second chances. Behind every comeback, there's someone who whispered, "You've got this." Behind every triumph, someone quietly believed before the world did. We fail together. We rise together. We heal together. The power of shared struggle. The story of Shackleton's crew. In 1914, explorer Ernest Shackleton led an expedition to cross Antarctica. But before they could even begin the crossing, their ship, the Endurance, was trapped in ice and destroyed. 28 men were stranded in the most brutal landscape on Earth. No rescue. No hope. Only cold, hunger, and endless white. They could have turned on each other. They could have given up. But Shackleton made a choice. He kept his crew together. Every night, he told jokes, sang songs, and gave each man a purpose, even if it was just keeping the fire going. They rationed food equally. They shared warmth. They fought despair together. After nearly 2 years trapped in the ice, Shackleton and all his men were rescued, every single one alive. Historians still call it one of the greatest survival stories ever told. Not because they didn't fail, they did, but because they failed forward together. Their unity became their lifeboat. The science of connection. Psychologists say that connection is one of the most powerful predictors of resilience. Not IQ, not toughness. Connection. Studies on trauma survivors show that people who share their struggles recover faster, develop stronger coping mechanisms, and find deeper meaning in pain. It's called communal resilience. When you say, "Me too," you turn isolation into identification. And in that moment, pain loses its poison. Because healing isn't about forgetting, It's about being understood. A story from the streets, the homeless choir. In California, a choir was formed called Voices of Our City. Its members weren't trained singers. They were homeless individuals, people who'd lost jobs, homes, families, and hope. When they started singing together, something miraculous happened. They didn't just find music, they found meaning. Their rehearsals became therapy sessions. Their performances became declarations of survival. One member, Ronald, said, "Before this, I didn't think I had a reason to live. Now, every time I sing, I remember I still matter." The choir went on to perform on America's Got Talent, bringing the audience to tears, not because they were perfect singers, but because they were living proof that broken voices can still make beautiful harmony. That's what failing forward together looks like. Broken people becoming unbreakable as one. The quiet heroes around you. Think about the nurse who stays long after her shift to comfort a grieving family. The teacher who tells a struggling student, "You're more than your grades." The friend who sits with you in silence when there are no words left to fix you. These are the quiet heroes who turn failure into fellowship. They remind us that success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about lifting others as you climb. From competition to compassion. We live in a world obsessed with winning, likes, followers, money, validation. But the real measure of success isn't how many people you beat. It's how many people you build. When you look at people who've failed, don't see weakness, see reflection. Because you've been there too. Different story, same ache. Competition isolates. Compassion unites. And unity creates momentum that no failure can destroy. The resilience of a village, the story of Nias Island. In 2005, the Indonesian island of Nias was devastated by a massive earthquake. Homes collapsed, schools were gone, thousands were left with nothing. But what happened next stunned aid workers. Within days, villagers began rebuilding, together. No one waited for the government. Farmers, fishermen, elders, and children all picked up tools. They didn't rebuild individual homes first. They rebuilt the community hall, where everyone could gather. Because they knew something most of us forget. When the community stands, individuals find strength again. Within months, laughter echoed through the island. The buildings were still cracked, but the spirit wasn't. When we share our scars, we share our power. You don't need to have the answers to help someone. You just need to show up. You don't need to be healed to hold space for someone else's pain. You just need to say, "I've been there too." Your honesty gives others permission to be honest. Your vulnerability gives others the courage to stop pretending. And your story might be the bridge someone needs to cross their own darkness. Because sometimes, the most powerful words in the world are, "You're not alone." Ordinary people, extraordinary support. There's James, who lost his job and started a small local group for unemployed dads. Not to complain, but to share ideas, skills, and encouragement. Today, that group has helped dozens start new businesses. There's Maya, a cancer survivor who now runs online support sessions for people going through chemo. She says, "I couldn't change the disease, but I could change how someone felt going through it." And Rafiq, a refugee who lost his home and family, now volunteering at shelters, saying, "When you have nothing, you realize giving something, even time, makes you feel human again." They may not be famous, but they are architects of hope. The ripple effect of kindness. Kindness doesn't end where it's given. It travels. A word of encouragement can echo through a person's lifetime. A simple act of help can save someone who thought they were invisible. One spark can light another. And before you know it, an entire village of souls is glowing because someone dared to care. That's the power of shared resilience. You don't just recover, you multiply recovery. Together, we rise higher. To fail forward together means to stop pretending we've got it all figured out. It means dropping the armor and admitting, "I'm still learning." It means realizing that strength isn't about standing tall alone. It's about locking arms and moving forward as one. There is no shame in needing help. There is no weakness in asking for support. Because even the strongest trees hold each other up through their roots. And maybe that's what the world needs more of. Not perfect people, but connected ones. The closing fire. Every great movement began with a few people who refused to give up on each other. Every revolution of spirit started with a community that believed, if one rises, we all rise. You were never meant to climb every mountain alone. You were meant to be the hand that helps another climb theirs. You were meant to fall together, rise together, and keep walking together until strength stops being a performance and becomes a shared pulse. Because failure shared becomes wisdom multiplied. And when we fail forward together, we don't just rebuild lives. We rebuild humanity. Chapter 12. Rise Higher. The Unbreakable Mindset. The wind at the top of the mountain doesn't whisper, it roars. It roars with the echoes of every fall you've taken, every night you thought you'd never see dawn, every tear that washed away the person you were, to reveal the person you were meant to become. You stand here, not because life spared you, but because life sculpted you. Every scar is a stroke of divine design. Every failure, a fingerprint of strength. Every crack, a place where your light learned how to shine through. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment your story rises. The making of the unbreakable. Unbreakable doesn't mean untouchable. It means tested. It means forged. It means refined in the fire, but not consumed by it. The unbreakable are not those who never fell. They are those who kept standing up after every fall. They've been through storms that would have shattered others. They've seen dreams collapse and still dared to dream again. They've faced rejection, betrayal, and loss, and turned every wound into wisdom. You don't wake up unbreakable. You become it, moment by moment, heartbreak by heartbreak, choice by choice. And somewhere between breaking and rebuilding, something shifts inside you. You stop begging life to be easier. You start demanding yourself to be stronger. That's when resilience stops being an act and becomes your nature. The final shift, from surviving to soaring. There comes a day when you realize you're no longer just surviving the fall. You're soaring because of it. The pain that once crippled you now powers your empathy. The rejection that once crushed you now refines your focus. The losses that broke you open now let light flood your soul. You are no longer defined by what hurt you. You are defined by what healed you. You have stopped running from pain and started learning from it. And in doing so, you've stepped into the highest evolution of yourself. The unbreakable mindset. The unbreakable mindset is built, not born. Let's be honest. The world doesn't hand out peace. It tests you until you learn to create your own. The unbreakable mindset isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about knowing you'll be okay even when you're not. It's understanding that every problem is not punishment, it's preparation. Every delay is not denial, it's direction. And every ending is not failure. It's the beginning of something bolder. You've learned to stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That is the moment you stop fighting against life and start flowing with it. The equation of inner power. At the core of every unbreakable person lies a simple formula. Pain plus perspective equals power. Pain alone can destroy you, but pain with perspective can build you. When you give meaning to your suffering, it transforms from a weight into a weapon. It stops being something that holds you down and becomes something that propels you forward. You begin to understand that resilience isn't resistance, it's adaptation. It's not pretending the storm doesn't exist. It's learning how to dance in the rain. The mirror moment. Stand in front of a mirror. Really look at yourself. Not just your face, but your fight. Not just your reflection, but your resurrection. You've been broken and rebuilt. You've been lost and found. You've been doubted and yet, here you are, undeniable. That person staring back at you isn't weak for having fallen. They are powerful because they rose. The unbreakable mindset starts when you stop seeing your reflection as a survivor and start seeing it as a creator. Because you are no longer waiting for the world to fix you. You are building the world within you. The silent fire inside. There's a fire that burns in every person who's failed forward. Quiet but unstoppable. It doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It just keeps glowing through every storm. You know that fire. You felt it in your chest when everything said, give up. And you whispered back, not yet. You felt it when the door slammed shut, and you still believed there was another way. You felt it when your heart shattered, and somehow, you kept loving anyway. That fire is your soul remembering who you are. A survivor, a fighter, a rebuilder, a believer. The world breaks everyone, but the wise learn how to burn brighter through the cracks. The paradox of strength. Here's the paradox of the unbreakable. They don't rise because they're fearless. They rise because they've made peace with fear. They don't stay strong because they never cry. They stay strong because they allow themselves to. They don't win because life is easy. They win because they've stopped expecting it to be. True strength isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, rooted, like mountains that have seen centuries of storms and still stand tall, unshaken. That's what you've become. A soul that no longer fears breaking, because you've already learned how to rebuild. The phoenix within. The phoenix doesn't fear the fire, it is the fire. It doesn't resist destruction, it uses it as rebirth. You too are a phoenix. Every time you've burned in the ashes of your own disappointment, you've been gathering the strength to rise higher. Every fall was not an ending, it was a flight in disguise. Every setback was not a curse, it was a calling to become more. That's the essence of the unbreakable mindset. Not escaping the fire, but becoming light through it. The mountain and the mirror. When climbers reach Everest's peak, they often say it's not the mountain they conquered, it's themselves. Because every step upward is a step inward. Every obstacle life throws at you isn't in your way, it's on your way. It's carving strength, clarity, and character into your soul. You don't need the world to validate your climb anymore. You've learned to validate yourself. Because the summit was never a place, it was a state of mind. The gift of perspective. You now understand that not getting what you wanted was often the greatest gift. That losing what you loved taught you to love yourself. That the failures you cursed turned out to be the foundation of your future. That's the wisdom of the unbreakable. They no longer see failure as something to fear. They see it as a force that shaped them. They don't look back in regret, they look back in recognition. Because they know, without that pain, I wouldn't be who I am. The legacy of the unbreakable. Your rise isn't just for you. It's for everyone who's still in the valley, wondering if they'll ever climb again. It's for every soul who's lost in the dark, waiting to see proof that light still exists. You are that proof. You are that light. You are the living evidence that it's possible to lose everything and still create something beautiful. That's the true legacy of the unbreakable. To rise so others believe they can too. From failure to freedom. The greatest freedom in life comes when you realize there's nothing left to fear. Because you've faced loss, pain, rejection, and despair, and you survived them all. When you've walked through the fire and come out glowing. Failure loses its power. Fear loses its voice. And life stops being a battlefield. It becomes a masterpiece. That's when you start to live fully. Not carefully. Not cautiously. But courageously. You stop tiptoeing through life, afraid of breaking things. You start running through it, creating things. You become the storm, not the one running from it. The moment of flight. Close your eyes and breathe. Feel every scar, every memory, every hard-earned truth coursing through you. You are not who you were when this journey began. You are lighter, stronger, clearer. You've failed, fallen, fought, forgiven, and finally, risen. And in this rise, you realize something extraordinary. You never needed the world to lift you. You only needed to remember, you were born with wings. The final words, rise higher. When life breaks you, rise higher. When people doubt you, rise higher. When fear whispers stop, rise higher. When the world turns its back, rise higher anyway. Because rising higher is no longer about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's not about ego, it's about evolution. It's not about perfection, it's about persistence. It's not about never falling. It's about always choosing to stand again. Rise higher because you've earned it. Rise higher because you deserve it. Rise higher because the world needs your fire, your fight, your faith. And when you rise, you'll light the way for someone else who's still in the dark, just as someone once did for you. Epilogue, the flame that never dies. As the credits roll in your life story, one truth remains. You were never defined by the fall. You were refined by it. Your strength isn't measured by how fast you ran, but by how often you refused to stop. So let the world remember you not as the one who never failed, but as the one who never stopped rising. Because you, my friend, are not just a survivor. You are the storm that learned to rebuild the sky. You are unbreakable. You are unstoppable. You are the rise itself.